Guys, wouldn't your wife or girlfriend love it if you treated her to the very best this Christmas? Now you can, with the world's softest pajamas by Pajamagram. Created by a team of pajama experts, the world's softest PJs are lighter than a cloud, softer than a bunny, like cashmere, only better. She'll love how heavenly they feel. Includes free gift packaging and Christmas delivery is guaranteed. So visit pajamagram.com or call 1-800-GIVE-PJs.
This is the Locker Room Podcast.
Welcome to the Locker Room here on ESPN Radio. I am Kirk Morrison, former 8-year NFL veteran in the National Football League. Along with me, former UCLA standout and current ESPN college basketball analyst, ESPN college basketball analyst Sean Farmer, and Super Bowl champion, 10-year NFL veteran, Mr. Willie Colon, at Willie Colon 66. What's up, Willie? How we doing this morning?
What's up? I appreciate the mister.
It just sounds so important.
It sounded very professional.
It sounds very professional, very important. So much to get to on this program today. We've got a bunch of just talk about NBA free agency, which is really taking part. It started on Friday night or Saturday morning, 12:01 a.m. Eastern time. We've got to get into a bunch of that. Also, we get into some of the trades that have went down, some of the signings as well. We get into some John McEnroe, Serena Williams talk. We got Miguel Montero. We got so much to cover from a week in sports. But I think we start first with what happened last night, and that's going to be our Straight Talk, segment for the day. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. I'm starting with last night's fight, or you can call it a Sunday afternoon, early evening fight over in Brisbane, Australia. Last night, Manny Pacquiao took on Jeff Horn in a WBO or it's too many numbers or too many letters to even recite, Willie. But it was a fight last night, and it was a fight here on our network, ESPN, last night in front of 51,000 fans over at Suncorp Stadium. A lot of people felt that this was Manny Pacquiao's kind of regaining control of the boxing world and hopefully have another rematch with one Floyd Mayweather. So last night, Manny Pacquiao comes in as a heavy favorite to beat Mr. Jeff Horn. But last night, that was not the case. In a decision, in a 12-round fight, there was a lot that was going on. And I'm going to try to set this up as best I can here, Willie and Sean, is that I want to give you some sound of what we may have missed, because there was a lot of reaction to what people saw and the way that this thing ended. It ended as, and I'll have the sound for you right here. Here's the decision last night from Manny Pacquiao and Joe Horn.
To the winner by unanimous decision, and new, oh my, the heavyweight champion of the world, the fighting pride of Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, Jeff the Hornet.
Yeah, I said it was Jeff Horn, but that was, it's Joe Horn, not Jeff Horn. That was ESPN Top Ranked Boxing on the final call last night. And then, fellas, here was the actual thing that really caught me. And before I throw it to you guys, the unanimous decision, it was Judge Waleska Roldan had it 117-111 for Jeff Horn. Judges Chris Flores and Judge Ramon Certain had it 115-113 Jeff Horn. And our own ESPN ringside analyst, Teddy Atlas, had it differently, though. He had it 116-111 for Manny Pacquiao. And here's ESPN boxing analyst Teddy Atlas post-fight.
Listen, I'm not going to mince words. That stupid practice in the States where some idiot decided to give trophies to everybody just for a good effort. Instead of saying, oh, guy won, guy lost, and you deal with it. You learn. It's part of growing up. It's part of life. They give everybody a trophy. That's what they did tonight. They gave a trophy, a win, a huge win to Horn, the local kid, for trying hard. You're not supposed to get it for trying hard. You're supposed to get it for winning. And I thought Pacquiao won the fight. If you go by the real rules, the Marcus of Queensberry rules, who lands the cleaner punches?
Speaking of punches, I was going Teddy Ellis right there. Manny Pacquiao, 32% punches landed versus Jeff Horn's 15% landed. Fellas, we got to get into this. Your first thoughts on this? I'll start with you, Willie. Your thoughts on what you saw from last night's fight?
It was a flat-out tragedy, and I think for me, watching it, I was more disappointed. First of all, did Horn fight a tough fight? Yes. Was he aggressive? Was he the busier fighter? Sure, but that shouldn't equate to a win. Pacquiao, I mean, the first round, Pacquiao felt him out. Horn gave him his best. Second round, Pacquiao came out strong. And from then on, I felt Pac started building momentum and taking it to Horn. This is what's wrong with boxing. You have these fights. You have these big showcases, so to speak, and the outcome is so bogus that it's hard to keep watching fights for the future, because everybody that watched this fight, and I don't care if you're a casual fan or not, you walked away from this feeling like Pacquiao was robbed. The better fighter didn't win. What happened was it was a hometown kid playing in his backyard, and they wanted to see David beat Goliath. And so they linked on Horn. And I think it's ridiculous. And it's hard being a guy or being an 80s kid, a 90s kid who grew up watching the Mike Tysons and the Evander Holyfields when it was the golden age of boxing, when boxing was all about being the more polished, the more physical fighter, and watch this outlandish stuff happen time after time. Because this isn't the first upset. This isn't the first time we've seen outcomes like this. And it's sad because the more you pay attention to the fight world, you don't even want to see boxing. You start leaning more towards MMA because the judges and the powers that be, even the fights are just better. And so it's sad that the outcome that Pacquiao got robbed. There was a rematch clause in the contract before the fight. All reports says that Pacquiao will fight Horn again. But I think this was, if you stayed up to watch this,
right,
you missed a good night's sleep. And that's what's hard about it. You know what I mean? And so, I don't know. I feel like Pacquiao got robbed. Horn, did he come out fighting? Was he the aggressor? Did he stand up? Sure. But you shouldn't get the title for having heart. That should just come with the package. Absolutely. So I struggle with this one, guys.
Before we get to you, Sean, I want to set this up as well, because yesterday between rounds 9 and 10, referee Mark Nelson even went to Jeff Horn's corner, and this is some of the sound of what referee Mark Nelson had to say to Horn after round 9.
Listen, I'm here to protect you, okay? I think you had enough. You want to continue? Yes. Show me something in this round, or I'm going to stop the fight. That's it.
So even referee Mark Nelson had to go to Jeff Horn's corner and say, look, I'm going to have to stop this fight. You don't look right. You don't look the same. You got to show me something. And then even at the end of the fight, this is another debacle of the fight last night, not just the decision, was that the fight was stopped 10 seconds before. Referee Mark Nelson jumps in between the fighters when there's 10 seconds left, stopping the fight, not because of someone was hurt or someone was knocked out, just because he thought the fight was already over. And so now I throw it to you, Sean. You watched this fight in depth from beginning to end. Your first thoughts after the decision was made?
Shock. In fact, so much shock. I had told my son that I would watch a movie with him once the fight was over. I anticipated this fight, like everybody else, was going to be over in the first 4 rounds. Manny was actually going to put him down to the ground. The guy had hit the mat in his 4 previous fights. And so I told my kid, I was like, hey, we'll watch a movie as soon as it's over. It's going to be quick. Well, 12 rounds later, as soon as it ended, I turned it off. I didn't wait for the decision because I already knew that Manny Pacquiao had won the fight. And then I logged onto my phone and I said, you've got to be kidding me. There was no way. I watched every second of that fight. And, yeah, you know what? I'll give Horn credit for this. When he was challenged in the corner and he talked his way to let that fight continue, he actually did come out and show something in the 10th. He's tough. But I agree with Teddy Atlas. This was, okay, well, he was the more aggressive fighter. He threw more punches. Well, then if that's the case, Floyd Mayweather would have lost every fight he's ever fought. Right. You know, because guys are throwing punches and he's dancing. But that's not what it's about. It's about boxing. It's about a skill set. And I agree with you, Willie, 100%. This is why people go to MMA. This is why people are going away from boxing. Now, I will say this, though. ESPN, and I'm not saying this because I work for the company. We all work for the company.
Well, I know
but it was great
watching
a championship fight with a high-level talent on free TV. You know, we're not paying pay-per-view here.
Right.
It's on ESPN. This is what boxing needs more of. There's 2 more fights coming up in August on ESPN, both of them with top-ranked, pound-for-pound, some of the best fighters in the world. This is great for the sport. The negative to it is the outcome in which we saw last night. The sport needs us to talk about it. The sport does not need us talking about how endings of fights are a complete sham and that you're awarding championship belts to a guy that tried hard. To me, the WWE has championship rules. You can't lose the belt via the count out or disqualification. Last night, I mean, that wasn't even a count out or disqualification. It was just a complete sham that they took the belt away from the champ and gave it to somebody who landed half as many percentage-wise punches and left the ring with only 2 headbutt cuts on either side, while the other guy's getting tended to in the back with ice bags and everything else because his face is a mess.
Yeah, man. As you can hear, we are fired up here on this Sunday on this edition of The Locker Room. That was Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. But it's not just about us. It's not about me. It's not about Sean. It's not about Willie. It's about you, the fans, you, the listeners out there. We want to hear from you. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. What did you think of last night's fight? Did Jeff Horn, the Australian, did he actually win? Was Manny Pacquiao robbed? We want to hear from you. That'll be next here. It's The Locker Room. Kirk Morrison, Sean Farnham, Willie Colon on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
You know, my whole career, I've always been, kind of the people's champ in the locker room.
I get around. The Locker Room here with Sean Farnham, Willie Colon. I'm Kirk Morrison. Get at us on Twitter as well, at Sean Farnham, at Willie Colon 66, at Kirk Morrison. Phone line's been lighting up. Get in here because there are not a lot of lines open right now. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. We've been talking about the Manny Pacquiao-Jeff Horn fight and just what a debacle it was. And before, guys, was looking at my timeline last night post-fight, and when the great Kobe Bean Bryant, tweets out a picture of Ice Cube, a confused look on Ice Cube's face, talking about the Pacquiao-Horn fight, you know that it was serious. A lot of athletes watched it last night. It wasn't just Kobe Bryant. It was Karl Anthony Towns saying they disrespected our boy Manny Pacquiao. Damian Lillard tweeted last night, boxing has real issues, man. This is just not right. And DeMar DeRozan said the sun must have been in the judges' faces last night that they couldn't watch the fight. So everybody was reacting, fellas. Before we get to the phone calls, just one more thing that you thought last night's fight, like you mentioned a little bit earlier, Sean, it was on ESPN last night. It was for everybody to see. This was supposed to be like the showcase that, okay, boxing is back. Yeah, there's going to be a big match between Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor later on, which is a mix of MMA/boxing, but this was Manny Pacquiao. This was a name that we knew. And to see the way that this fight ended last night, it still it left us with a sour taste in our mouth yesterday.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers tweeted, boxing is a joke. It proves it again tonight. Are you kidding me with these scorecards? 117 to 111 on one card? What fight was that judge watching?
Let's go Roldan, yeah.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about it to me in watching it was Tim Bradley, who won in a very controversial way on scorecards as well against Manny Pacquiao, in a result that a lot of people thought was a sham, said in the final round, if you go back and watch the 12th round, he said, I think this one is a lot tighter than we even feel that it is sitting right here. And then Teddy Atlas said, well, is that because you know judges in boxing and how they view it? So even before the result was given, the guys at ringside already were going to a place where they were like, it shouldn't be this way, but it might go this way. And then it did. And that, to me, it's got to get fixed. Boxing has got to fix this if they want to fix their sport and make it relevant once again.
It was sad because
they dropped the ball on it, Willie, right? They dropped the ball last night.
Oh, listen, it was a total sympathy. I mean, it was all I saw was sympathy. This guy, listen, he's 29 years old. He's a former Olympian. He's a former school teacher. He fought in his backyard. They gave it to him. I saw the highlights. I watched it this morning. I watched it over. You can't sit here and tell me that Pac lost that fight. And the only reason Pacquiao got cut was due to incidental headbutt. Pacquiao was there. He was in that fight.
Twice.
He won that. He was like this wasn't like, I can see it. It was totally it was egregious from the standpoint if you're for your fan. And like we all play sports for one reason. You just want a shot. Right. You want an opportunity to win whatever match you're in, and hopefully you don't get shanked at the end of it. Pacquiao got shanked, and we all watched it. And then what's even worse about it, at the end of this, there's nothing nobody can do about it. Pacquiao just has to take it on the chin. And for me, I would have loved to see Freddie Roach and Pacquiao say flat out, I got robbed. Yeah. Just say it. Like, enough is enough. If they have the audacity to cheat you, as a fighter, you should have enough cojones to say, listen, I got robbed here, man. I've been a former champ. I am who I am. I still got it. I got robbed. Because
that's what I didn't like about the press conference at all.
Right. Don't
sit there and say the judges are judges. No.
No, not at all. Call the judges out. Call it what it is.
Right? This ain't the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball where you can fine the players for talking bad about the officials, right? You can't do that. So why not?
They're not going to. Yeah, just go all in. Go all in. How long did you train? How many hours did you put in? And then to go out there and show out like Pacquiao did. Now, look, I will say this. All the talk was about his pop being back in his gloves.
Yes.
It's not back. I mean, he unloaded everything he had in the 9th round, and he still couldn't put a guy that had fallen to the mat in his 4 previous fights down to the mat.
Yeah,
so he still has all the skill set.
Sean, that was that young bull last night in Jeff Horn. And think about this. We've all been in that situation, fellas, where we're young, we're excited, we're pumped up, and we playing at the crib, we playing at home. Like this is a home fight for him.
He was fighting for pride.
In front of saying people he went to high school with, middle school with. He's like, I'm not going down.
His first girlfriend was probably in the crowd.
Oh yeah. So you already know he had a different kind of I think like body of armor he had on last night. But 888-SAY-ESPN 888-729-3776. Phone lines are jammed right now. I'm gonna start this one off. Let's go to Chuck. Chuck over in Tennessee. You're on the locker room. Kirk Morrison, Willie Colon, and Sean Farnham.
Hello, friends. Well, I watched the fight, and I've been a boxing fan all my life. I agree with you guys that the scorecards were ridiculous. What happened, though, is the referee allowed the fight to be a rough and tumble, grab, push, shove, butt type fight. Now, Pacquiao, if you're a boxing purist and you're just looking at the skill set, Pacquiao outperformed this other guy. But all of that other stuff is involved in boxing. Some of the great fighters were maulers. And I'll say this: I love Manny Pacquiao. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. And I don't think he will ever beat this guy unless maybe the fight's in the Philippines or maybe in California or America somewhere. I don't think he can hurt him. He can't make him respect him. Pacquiao could not make this man respect him. Now, the 9th round was magnificent. I thought Pacquiao was going to knock him out. I thought it was over. Somehow or another,
wait, Chuck, let me jump in here. Chuck, let me ask you a question. And I appreciate your call, and I'm going to ask you this question because I want your feedback. You're sitting there saying, okay, he's not going to beat him unless it's in the Philippines or it's in California. He beat him last night. He pummeled him in the 9th round.
Exactly.
It was over.
You cannot sit there and call. Look, if you say you're a boxing fan, and I agree with you, okay, it was a rough and tumble fight. The most consistent punch that Horn got in on Manny is when he had him in a headlock and did the little jab to the side of the head twice. That's the punches that he landed.
It was a little MMA style last night, fellas. I mean, look at Manny Pacquiao's, both of his. He had 2 cuts and he had a bloodied face at the end. If you looked at that fight, obviously it was one of those fights in which Manny Pacquiao, to me, when you watch the technical things of boxing, he passed one test that people just don't understand. I feel like he passed the eye test. Maybe not to the judges, but he passed my eye test. I know he passed your test, Willie, your test, Sean, but he didn't pass the judges' test, and that's unfortunate.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
You got to go out there and earn that respect from the guys in the locker room.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I'm so happy, I feel like I can fly.
Disclaimer, you will not be able to fly by switching to Geico. This is against the laws of physics and nature. If you find yourself flying, please seek professional and or medical help immediately. In the unlikely event you find yourself flying, you might be a superhero, or a pigeon, or a superhero named Pidgewoman, who was bitten by a radioactive pigeon. If you are indeed Pidgewoman, Geico retains all licensing publishing rights in the event Pidgewoman the movie becomes a top-grossing Hollywood blockbuster.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
My whole career, I've always been, kind of the people's champ in the locker room.
It's The Locker Room here on ESPN Radio. Sean Farnham, Willie Colon. I am Kirk Morrison, 888, say ESPN, 888-729-3776. We were talking to Manny Pacquiao and Jeff Horn, the fight, the previous segment in the first hour, but really this weekend, or are we calling this a holiday weekend truly, even though that 4th of July is until Tuesday? So you call this a holiday weekend? I'm
just saying on holiday the whole time.
Okay, Sean calls it a holiday weekend. What about you? Is this really a holiday weekend, Willie?
Well, yeah, because, it's really a barbecue holiday weekend. That's what matters. It's not, yeah. As much as we love and celebrate the flag, it's really about your best barbecue game at this point. So
I got you, but to me, it's the weekend. Then you get Monday. It's not a actual national holiday, except for Tuesday which is the 4th of July. But for me, it's always NBA free agent period time, right around the 4th of July. And it got off on Friday night, sort of with a bang, as we all waited for the 12:01 a.m. Eastern time for July 1st deadline, or not deadline, but for free agency to start. And it didn't start right then, because it actually started about 6 hours earlier, as the news had broke that Paul George had been traded. He was traded from the Indiana Pacers to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Sabonis and Victor Oladipo. It was the trade that really had everybody saying, whoa, where did this come from? Because no one had Oklahoma City. Here's Ramona Shelburne, one of our NBA insiders. Here's her thoughts on the trade.
When I first heard about this deal, I was scared to report it because it just seems wrong, right? You were like, is this right? No, seriously, really?
Where are the draft
I'm not missing something? It's just Victor Oladipo and Sabonis, that's it? I felt like there had to be more to it. And no, that's it.
That was Ramona on the trade. And then our own Brian Windhorst gave us, was there a winner and loser in this trade? Here's Brian Windhorst on the Paul George trade.
I can only evaluate what they actually got. And the fact that they got no draft picks in the deal, when I know that they've been offered as many as 4 first-round draft picks for Paul George. And sure, okay, none of them were the number 1 overall pick, that's fine. But how about any pick? That's unbelievable to me. And then you look at the players they got, and, obviously you're in a leveraged position when you make a trade for a star. That's why nobody wants to be in that position. But it's just a really, questionable haul.
Everybody wants to move out west. That's all we know. That was Brian Windhorst on Darian Mail, our NBA insider. But everybody wants to move out west. We talked about a little bit earlier, well, off air a little bit, that Jimmy Butler on a draft day trade goes from Chicago over to Minnesota in the Western Conference. But now this trade for Paul George, Oklahoma City, which actually saves them money on this deal, they get a chance to get another guy to team with the NBA's MVP, Russell Westbrook. And, Sean, when you look at the way this trade sort of happened, and they're still out there making some deals, Oklahoma City is, but with Paul George now teaming up with Russell Westbrook, where do you now put the Oklahoma City Thunder as far as the rankings in the West, minus the Golden State Warriors?
Okay, well, let's just take a look at where they were this year. They were the 6th seed, 47 wins overall in the season. 2 teams ahead of them, Utah Jazz and the Los Angeles Clippers. Dependent upon what happens with Gordon Hayward, which we'll talk about in a little bit, they could easily slip. The Clippers, I think, clearly have slipped with Chris Paul going to the Houston Rockets. There's no reason to believe that OKC can't climb all the way up to the 4th best team in the Western Conference. Paul George is the perfect player to play with Russell Westbrook. So Russell's not going to average a triple-double. He's not going to be the MVP of the NBA next year. But what he's going to be is a better version of himself, because he's going to have more confidence in somebody else out on the floor with him that can make plays, and that's having an all-star caliber player in Paul George. So, look, Oklahoma City, they were thieves.
Right.
We talked about the fight being stolen from Manny Pacquiao. The theme of the locker room today is thievery.
Yes.
Because they stole Paul George, even if it's just for 1 year. And he ends up signing with the Lakers in 2018. Just let's go back to originally the proposed trade in 2011 that would have had Chris Paul to the Lakers, Pau Gasol to the Rockets, and New Orleans would have got Kevin Martin, Scola, Lamar Odom, who was really good at the time, all right, as well as a first-round draft pick. And that was vetoed by the league as being unfair.
Yeah,
well, David Stern was still commissioner of the NBA. This trade would have to be vetoed because it is a thievery for Oklahoma City.
Willie, when you first heard this trade, obviously, wait, you're a Knicks fan, right? Did I get that right, Willie?
You're 100% correct. Yes.
Yeah, I thought that. And
hey, but happy days, congratulations.
Happy days are coming, though. No more Phil, baby. Happy days are coming for my man Willie Colon over there. But when you heard this trade for Paul George by Oklahoma City, your first thoughts were?
Well, I thought it was a ploy to keep Russell at home. I know next year he's up. And I think when you look around the league, Russell's been loyal to Oklahoma. He gave him everything he had this season. But I think they said, listen, we want Russell to be a lifer here. In order to keep him being a lifer, we're going to have to surround him with players that can help him win, to kind of get him over the hump. So that's why for me, it was a no-brainer to get Paul George. I didn't see him on the radar. So it was easy to kind of say, all right, well, it makes sense. But I'm thinking about it from Paul's standpoint. I'm like, wow, I'm going to have to adjust my game now because it's not about me at this point. And for Russ, it helps him because he goes, listen, I don't have to play the big minutes no more. I have a guy on the court that can carry the load, that can keep the momentum if I'm not on the floor. So it's a win-win all the way around. But I'm more worried about Paul here because I feel like he's going to have to adjust his game. He's going to have to figure out how can he play with Russ. Can they be successful on the same court together? And how can they make it work? They're both good defenders. They both have an up-and-down game. Obviously, Paul gives you more range on the wing. He can definitely guard. But it's going to be I think it's going to be some turbulent times for him trying to adjust to how Russ plays. Because the one thing that made Kevin Durant leave was that Russ is a ball hawk. That he does put a lot of pressure on the guy next to him. If he doesn't get a shot, if he doesn't get enough shots, he's going to force the ball to Paul and make Paul George make his own shots.
I think it was a better opportunity for KD to leave, to go be around other great players. And
we can argue that all the way through. But my point to what I'm saying is, I'm interested to see how Paul George is going to adjust to Russell. Does it make sense? Yes. But it's still going to be an acclimation process. They're going to have to get used to each other, and they're going to have to make it work. So it's going to be interesting.
That wasn't that wasn't the only Paul that was on the move this week. The other Paul, with Chris Paul, goes from the Los Angeles Clippers over to the Houston Rockets, teaming up with one James Harden. When you look at that combination right now, what's going on in Houston, where does that put Houston at? And I'm going to throw this to you, Sean. Where does that put Houston at now? Because this West, before this offseason started, it was always clearly, hey, it's the Warriors. Then you throw in, there's a little mix between Houston, San Antonio. Like that 2 through 5, you kind of had a lot of teams in there. Now you look at what Minnesota has done. We just mentioned Houston. Now I look at the West, and I don't know how this thing is going to play out in that middle of the pack.
Well, yeah, look, in the middle of the pack is what we're talking about, okay? And I think, look, Houston has improved dramatically. I think having Chris Paul is a great grab for them, even though he's late in his career. If they were to face the Warriors in a 7-game series, I give them 2 wins.
Okay.
The series goes to 6.
That's more than Cleveland. That's more than Cleveland right now.
So instead of being a sweep, now all of a sudden we're looking at maybe lose 2 games. Right. Okay, so there's still a huge gap here. The larger gap, though, that we're talking about, and you mentioned it, Jimmy Butler, where does he go? He comes west. Paul George goes west. As Bill Walton so often says with Dave Pasch on Thursday nights in the Pac-12, nobody says go east. Come west, young fella. All right? Everybody's coming west. And with that, you look at the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
Who's good in the Eastern Conference? I mean, besides the Cavs, the Celtics have a potential to maybe challenge the Cavs a little bit more. But the rest of the Eastern Conference, the Hawks are worse.
Right.
The Pacers are worse. The Bulls are worse. The best players are all coming west, and this is going to be a heavily dominated year for the Western Conference, as it has been for the last 5, but even more so now.
I did see a tweet out there, Sean, that said the NBA is really the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference is the D League. So that's
well, the G League. Remember, they changed it now. It's the G League.
The G League.
It's the Gatorade League. Yeah.
But
here's an interesting thought, though. What if I'm the NBA and I'm looking at this, because this is a concern as far as competitiveness.
Right.
Why wouldn't you just say, you know what, we're getting rid of the Eastern Conference, we're getting rid of the Western Conference, we're going to reschedule, we're going to take the top 16 teams regardless.
They don't want to do that.
And that's who's making the playoffs.
They don't want to do that.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
You got to go out there and earn that respect from the guys in the locker room.
Sean Farnham, Willie Colon, Kirk Morrison. This is The Locker Room. Reach us on Twitter at Sean Farnham, at Kirk Morrison, at Willie Colon 66. And your calls. We'll be fielding your calls as well. 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. New from Barbasol, premium disposable razors, quite possibly the best thing to happen to Barbasol since shaving cream. You're looking good, America. You're shaving with Barbasol. The NBA has a parity issue, fellas, and they are trying not to admit it. I remember listening and hearing Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, saying, no, this is just the NBA. It will go. It will pass. This is just where we're at for right now. We don't need to go and make drastic changes on and changing East and West or even trying to go just straight 16 teams, the best 16 make the playoffs, and you see from there. When I look at the NBA right now, everybody's out west, and you have maybe a couple decent players as far as the superstars in the East, but nothing compared to what the West is all about. And, Sean, I don't know if there's a quick fix, but if you do make a drastic change, you can't just unseed what you've done every time the NBA's tide is changing. Because what happens in 10 years when all of a sudden these draft picks start to pan out? Or Markelle Fultz, we talk about Jackson and Tatum. All these guys start to pan out 10 years from now, and maybe the East is taking over the West like it was in the 80s.
Right, and we could see a shift. I think the next free agency class will start looking at it and go, where is the opportunity for me to be even a brighter and bigger star? And I think a lot of those teams are going to be in the Eastern Conference. But I think the current state of the NBA, it has to be alarming for the league, and it has to be alarming for fans as well. Look, you have two teams that we can close our eyes right now. All these free agent moves aside, who's in the finals next year, fellas?
Golden State Cavaliers.
Okay, good. That's done. All right, now what? All right, so now you look at it and go, okay, let's look at the Eastern Conference. As it stands right now, these are the teams that made the playoffs last year. Do they make the playoffs in the Western Conference? Bulls?
No.
No?
No.
Pacers? No.
Not a chance.
No.
Milwaukee, I think, is actually improving. I like Milwaukee.
I like that one,
I think
too,
they
yes.
would. The Atlanta Hawks? No. The Wizards? Okay, sure. Raptors, well, Kyle Lowry, what's going to happen in that situation? Kind of some uncertainty right now with them. Cavs and Celtics, yes. Okay, so you're talking about maybe 4, maybe 5 teams of good or decent basketball in the Eastern Conference, where conversely you look at the Western Conference right now, and I hope for ESPN's perspective, because we have a ton of games during the regular season, I hope they're loaded with Western Conference teams because Warriors, Spurs, Rockets, Thunder. I love what the Trailblazers have done. The Pelicans will be better this year. Drew Holiday, if he's healthy, with Boogie and with Anthony Davis. The Timberwolves are making a huge push. They're going to be a playoff team this upcoming year. The Lakers have excitement because Alonzo Ball. You know, I mean, it's just the Western Conference is loaded, and the Eastern Conference is not. So if you don't make a change, and if you don't do anything drastic, which I understand why the league wouldn't want to do that, what you're going to have is very imbalanced playoffs, like we saw this year in particular, and the Cavs will just roll right through the Eastern Conference, walk their way in the NBA Finals, and then probably lose to the Golden State Warriors again.
Willie, does this hurt the legacy of LeBron James, this Eastern Conference now? Because he's going to continue to keep going back. And, look, everybody's going to say, oh, it's such an accomplishment. Who else has been to this many consecutive conference finals and they've been to the NBA final? But I think more so this year, the competition in the East, as much as we've seen it, is just not there to a point that can you really give a LeBron James credit if he does come out of the East?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to 12 NBA finals and you lose half of them, it doesn't make you a winner. And I think that the issue which you're looking at right now is LeBron. It's pretty much him against the NBA. It's not even Golden State. I mean, everybody out west, you know, San Antonio's better. Like, I mean, Sean just ripped off a bunch of teams that would give Cavs problems. And so when you look at it from the NBA standpoint, if you're a stud or whoever you are, and you have a chance to go east, you better go to a team that has another player, or you better be bringing somebody with you. Because if you're on, let's say, if you're going to Atlanta, or if you're going to Orlando, like I had mentioned off air, your game may get exposed. You're putting yourself in boiling water. So the East is at a position where a lot of players, I think, they're at a position. If I'm going to go East, I want to go with a contender. I want to go with somebody that's at least building to go somewhere. You're not going to just make that jump to the East and go play for a team for a large sum of money and just say, well, I'm out here with all this money, but I'm getting my head cracked every night. That's going to shorten your career at the end of the day. So I think a lot of ball players, you may want to join Isaiah Thomas. You may want to join the John Wall. Teams that are kind of on the up and up. But it's hard to watch the NBA right now during the regular season because it's just bad basketball. And it's hard to kind of sit there and say this is what we want to watch when we all grew up watching the golden era of basketball. When you sat on the couch and watched all 4 quarters. And right now, like you just mentioned, we know how this is going to end. It's going to end up with Golden State and the Cavs. Whippy. At some point, somebody's got to change the channel.
But hey, listen, I'll tell you this, too. Look at the Eastern Conference right now. And I said this a couple of weeks ago with Antoine Walker and Ryan Hollins, and they both said I was nuts. Philadelphia 76ers can be a playoff team this year.
Yeah,
they're at least an exciting team to watch. They'll probably be a playoff team, but they're exciting to watch.
And they're relevant in the Eastern Conference right now. They're relevant.
That's
because the Eastern Conference is so bad overall.
Yeah. In the Western Conference, they wouldn't sniff the playoffs. In the Eastern Conference, they have a chance.
And they just added also J.J. Redick, the sharpshooter from the Los Angeles Clippers. So now, could that make this team even more attractive? And you know what really attracts us all to, and we know this, fellas, from our playing days, we know this. When you start winning, that attracts people. When you're winning and having fun at doing it, that attracts even more people. We watch it. You can kind of get a sense. And I'm not saying it because I'm a Warriors fan, but
you watch the Warriors.
No, because there were certain teams that even when I was in college and I'm watching the NFL, and there was teams that you like, man, I would love to play for them. For me,
go ahead and say the Steelers.
I'm not going to say the Steelers. You want me to say Steelers?
Come on, say it.
No, it was actually kind of funny. It was the Jacksonville Jaguars. Remember they had the all black
Byron, Fred Taylor, and those guys.
And it was a team that was like not a bunch of renegades, but guys who weren't like the main names, but they played well together and they had fun. Like when you can sense when teams are out there having fun, they're making plays, they're high-fiving and jumping up and down, and you can say like, man, that's what's up. That's infectious. And I think that's where, to your point, Sean, where Philadelphia is leaning towards. And could this be the Golden State Warriors in 5-6 years? Because we didn't see it with the Klay Thompsons and Draymond Greens and even Steph Curry, who had sort of glass ankles before. Now, where they're at now, could Philadelphia finally come up that same sort of path?
Well, I think the key for them, obviously, is going to be Joel Embiid's health. Joel has to be healthy. If he can sustain his level of play and just be healthy, the 76ers are a game changer, and they become a destination spot for veterans. They're going, you know what, I can go join that young group. I don't have to have all the pressure on my shoulder. We can be really good and win. And I think that's kind of thing. But I go back to what you were just saying there, Kirk, is like, whether you're in the NFL, the NBA, or in the college. Like when I made my decision to go to UCLA, I made my decision because it was just a little bit over a year removed from them winning the national championship in 1995. 96 they lost to Princeton, which is the only reason UCLA saw me and recruited me. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been at the state championship game. But they saw me play, and I had opportunity to go play bigger role and have more success at a smaller level college right away. And instead, I wanted to be part of something great because I wanted to have a chance to experience what it's like to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, to win conference championships, to be playing the big games on ABC with Vitale and Musburger on the call against Syracuse in February in 1999. Those were the things that enticed me and wanted me to be part of that because winning is infectious. Winning is fun. When you're losing, we've all had a season or two where things didn't go the right way, whether it was in high school, whatever. But when you're losing, nothing is fun. Nothing is fun. It just becomes to a point where you feel like you're banging your head against a wall.
Well, I'll tell you this. Yeah, go ahead. Willie.
Yeah, a large part of going to a winning championship or a championship team or a winning team is the coach. Is how do I identify with this coach? Is he going to put me in a situation where I can be successful? Because you can go to a winning team and just feel out of place if you feel like you're abilities or what you can do is not maximized. And I think a lot of these guys, when you go into a winning team, all it has to do with your OC or your head coach or the person that's going to put you in a position to be successful. Can I trust him? Is this the right fit for me? Because the culture may be great, the lifestyle and everything that goes along with it, but can I add to this situation? And I think that's a big component to joining any team.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
My whole career, I've always been, kind of the people's champ in the locker room.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
My whole career, I've always been, kind of the people's champ in the locker room.
It's The Locker Room here on ESPN Radio. Sean Farnham, Willie Colon. I am Kirk Morrison. At Sean Farnham on Twitter, at Willie Colon 66, and at Kirk Morrison. 888-729-3776. That's 888-729-3776 is our phone line. Oh, you know what's always in season, fellas. Remember this. Surprising a friend or a loved one with a bouquet from 1-800-Flowers.com. 1-800-Flowers has amazing offers on bouquets starting at just $29.99. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. We talked a little bit last segment about the differences between contracts and the NBA and the NFL. And it kind of comes off the big contract signed by Steph Curry. 5 years, $200 million. He's the first $40 million a year player in the first $200 million contract in the NBA's history. And it got us to thinking about could we ever see the NFL getting to that? Obviously, Derek Carr is now the highest paid player on average in the NFL. He signed a 5-year, $125 million extension. But we know with the NFL, it's more about the guarantee, where in that contract for Derek Carr, the guarantees, I believe, were upwards of $70 million. So it's not the full thing is guaranteed. So it's still
and
different.
It's backloaded. Remember that, too. A lot of
yes.
that money's coming on those final years of that contract where you can assume his production may drop a little bit.
Right. And also, too, he'll be playing in Las Vegas where there will be no state tax. So hopefully Derek Carr, quarterback of the Oakland Raiders, will be making a little bit more on that dollar than he would in California. But Willie, when we look at these contracts in the NBA, and this happens every year. I mean, this is like one of those traditions that just keep on going. Then when we watch the NBA free agency start, and you start to see guys like Patty Mills get 4 years, $50 million, or Tony Snell 4 years, $46. Guys who are, you look at some of the statistics and where they are, you're like, wait, he's in the NBA and he making how much? And you look at where some of the NFL players are saying, man, we know that our sport generates way more money. Our sport should be able to divvy up more money to the players, and yet it never happens that way. Is that more on players not banding together, or the NFL just not relinquishing and giving the players what they want?
I think it's a mixture of both, but I put a lot of onus on the players. I mean, we have to come together, especially next year. We talked about going to the table as far as dealing with our collective bargaining agreement and kind of figuring out how can we get more money in our pockets. The owners are they're a mafia in itself. They're band together. They're gonna bang for each other. So let's put that out there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're looking at TJ Lane, right, offensive lineman for the Lions,
yes,
he's making $3 million in his base salary, right? That's 37.2 less than Steph Curry. And this is an offensive lineman, a top tier offensive lineman who puts his knees, head, shoulders in the lineup battle every Sunday. And when you walk away from the game, listen, I'm going to be honest. I've played a long time, been to 2 Super Bowls, won one, lost one, played a lot of playoff games. The after effects of me playing that long, I can't run. Like, my knees are shot. I can't. You know how jealous I am when I see people on TV go for a nice jog, or when I look out my window and see people run or do things? There's players from all the way around the league who are shattered. Careers, lifestyles are done because of the effects of football. And yet you're not going to guarantee us our money? Like, yeah, we would love to stand on our feet all day. How many times, Kurt, I know for you, how many times you just stand and your body just start locking up? How it's hard to kind of – I know guys who can't even play with their kids because their knees and shoulders are shot. How they can't –
that back start locking up.
Right, that back, their knees, their ankles. I know ball players who I've played with, guys who I've went to war with who are just shot. And to not guarantee these guys not even their money – but for them to kind of survive after football, and you're going to nickel and dime them, I think this is a flat-out tragedy. And I know for some people that are listening, like, well, at least you have an opportunity. Listen, man, I can't jog. I can't run. My lifestyle is totally different because of my effects of me playing as long as I've played. Yes, it was my choice. Yes, I stepped on the field and put my life on the line every Sunday, but I still should be compensated for it, just like Steph Curry and just like the rest of the guys in the NBA.
Sean, listen, what I hear when I hear you guys talking about this is fair market value. Right.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think that, Willie, you're saying like, hey, we should be paid so exorbitant, such a large amount that it doesn't even make sense. I think you're just saying just give us what we deserve.
Correct.
Right. And when you look at the NFL, guys, compare it to the NBA. The NBA brings in $4.8 billion last year as a league. They profited their revenue of $4.8 billion. The NBA.
Yes.
Major League Baseball did $9.5 billion. The National Football League did $13 billion.
Yeah.
$13 billion. So let's compare that to the NBA. Yes, the numbers are less as far as the number of players that you have per roster. All right. But you're also almost 3 times as much, from $4.8 billion to $13 billion for the NFL. And again, I've seen it with myself. I've seen, there are guys that I went to school with at UCLA, guys that I knew from Southern California. Justin Fargas, one that played for the Oakland Raiders, that have residual effects from playing in the league.
Correct.
And again, I'm not saying that, all right, Willie, you mentioned it. It's a lifestyle. It's what you chose to do. It made you a good amount of money because of your talents and your work ethic and your drive to be great at something. And same for you, Kirk. But at the same time, like when you look at that Derek Carr contract, you go, okay, man, that's a lot of money. But then all of a sudden you go 5 years, $70 million, with a lot of that money, by the way, a lot of money is backloaded in that contract, which he's not going to see.
Non-guaranteed, right?
Non-guaranteed that he's not going to see. And then you look at Steph Curry's contract, you cannot compare the two. You can't.
Yeah. Well, I think also, too.
And that's the problem I have as a sports fan. I'm not an ambassador for the NFL. I'm not here trumpeting the horn and just sounding it off and screaming and yelling because I have a vested interest in this. I just think that athletes and people that put in the time and have the talent and skill set that everybody has to make the professional ranks should be paid fair market value.
What it comes down to is that the NFL has to up their salary cap for an industry that brings in $13 billion. And then we're just talking about revenue. We're not even talking about overall and what the teams per team can make. That means that, which is the NFL, their salary cap was set at $167 million this year. So for 2017, $167 million is dispersed for each team for their players. Okay. The NBA in comparison. So remember, the 167 is for the 53 guys on the roster and then guys that you may sign throughout the year. So you have $167 million to spend. Where I look at the NBA, their new cap came in this year at $99 million, and the luxury tax is over at about $119. So basically, you're splitting that amount of money, so about $100 million, between 15 players. That's it, 15 players. So when you look at them compare, yes, their contracts are going to be bigger, but this is where the NFL, the players union, how can you get the salary cap in the NFL to get bigger? Because that's the only way you're going to be able to pay players. What Willie's saying, what I think is being said, is the fair market value, the fair value for a such a violent sport and for such a sport that doesn't have the longevity of an NBA or Major League Baseball, that players should be compensated I think, a little bit more than what they have been doing. And it is a crime that some of these teams are able to, or they're able to do this because of the owners and their group of guys saying this is how we're going to do things, and they're just not changing because the players can't come together to say, you know what, if you don't want to do it, then we're not going to play. And that will never happen. Too many guys are going to always say, you know what, I got to make money, I got to play, and I'll do it for this amount.
And that's a tragedy in itself, Kirk, because that's the problem.
Right.
The owners know, if I could put pressure on your home, if I could put pressure on your way of living, you're going to fold. But we also forget the players before us that stood in line, who picketed, who really fought for us to even have a shot at the table. When you go back to the 80s with the free agency and everything that goes along and all the history of the NFL, there was players before us that set the table up for us. So it's almost egregious to kind of think like, listen, if we don't sacrifice, not for ourselves, but for the people ahead of us, then it will never get right. And we got to start, as players or players that are in the NFL now, they got to stop. They got to think outside themselves now. I know it's about the family and I know it's about everybody else, but it's about the generations to come. And if you're a young guy in the NFL, you got to be like, hey, we got to make a change. And next year's your shot. You got a chance at the table. Don't blow it. Don't blow it like we blew it in 2010. We got to do something now. We got to get the power away from Roger Goodell. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, but one of the other things, too, though, and this is where we all have to sit down and look at these contracts in the NBA aren't going anywhere. They're going to continue to skyrocket up. And I think in the NFL, we're only talking about a certain group of guys that can average a certain amount. In the NBA, it seems like everybody is able to get, like I mentioned, Patty Mills, Tony Snell. We saw some other contracts of guys who aren't the most household
Timothy
names.
Mozgov's contract from last year. I mean, that's just another example. Well, dang. I mean,
they're not household names, but you're seeing the big money that's being squared, being thrown away. But that's the NBA, the NFL. That's going to be always the continuing debate.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
You got to go out there and earn their respect from the guys in the locker room.
It's The Locker Room here on ESPN Radio. Sean Farnham, Willie Colon. I am Kirk Morrison. A little update here. The Battle of Brisbane aired live and exclusively on ESPN and ESPN Deportes. The fight between Jeff Horn and Manny Pacquiao re-airs tonight on ESPN2 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time and is available to stream at any time on the ESPN app. Fellas, this week, John McEnroe had some comments on Serena Williams. He has a new book out, and last week, those comments got picked up by everybody. And to some, they were seen defensive. To me, I thought they were perfectly fine. He was giving his opinion, and I thought his opinion is just that, his opinion. It didn't have to be brought to, I think, the landscape of where everyone now is saying, oh, he didn't like it. He was almost borderline sexist. Here's those comments, and we'll dig into them right after that. Here's John McEnroe on last week's weekend Sunday edition with Lulu Garcia-Navarro.
We're talking about male players, but there is, of course, wonderful female players. Let's talk about Serena Williams. You say she is the best female player in the world in the book.
Best female player ever, no question.
Some wouldn't qualify it. Some would say she's the best player in the world. Why qualify it?
Oh, she's not, you mean the best player in the world, period?
Yeah, best tennis player in the world. You know, why say female player?
Well, because if she played the men's circuit, she'd be like 700 in the world.
You think so?
Yeah.
I saw nothing wrong with that comment. And that was, again, the weekend Sunday edition with Lulu Garcia-Navarro. John McEnroe, I thought he was just saying, look, she would be 700. He was saying it more or less, look, it's just two different sports. There's women's tennis and there's men's tennis. She is the greatest women's tennis player of all time. I agree with that. And then I think you can even throw on this. She may be, and you can debate this, fellas, the most accomplished tennis player of all time, meaning that in both men's and women's. But when it comes to saying she's just the best player of all time, that's where I would definitely have to disagree with Miss Lulu there in that question, that because I don't think that you can characterize her as that. Sean, when you first heard these comments, is that where you lean towards, or what did you think of it?
Look, when we look at any sport that's an individual sport, there's a couple ways to look at it. First of all, I know this. I couldn't win a major pregnant.
Right.
She did.
Facts.
She won the Aussie Open pregnant. So, like,
right.
All right, truly unbelievable. And I think that John McEnroe was saying that she is the best female player of all time. And Serena herself with David Letterman a couple years back, I saw this on thebiglead.com. They have a story on it. And it says, in that article, she says it's two different sports. The way the speed, the velocity in which the ball is hit, served, and returned is different than the female sport. That's Serena Williams at her own words. When we look at great athletes, and we often want to do this, we want to compare them. Okay, so let's take, for example, the 400-meter freestyle. Paul Biederman is the world record holder at 3 minutes and 40 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Katie Ledecky is 16 seconds slower. Katie Ledecky right now is the greatest female swimmer in the world, and likely when it's all said and done, she will be the Michael Phelps of swimming on the female side of things. Do we lessen her accomplishments simply because she was slower than the men's world record? Or do we sit back and say, you know what, this is an incredible athlete accomplishing incredible things? To me, I don't look at the gender. I just look at the athlete and go, can I appreciate what they're able to accomplish, how they approach this, how they train? And the answer is yes and yes. And when you talk about Serena, I think she's one of the greatest tennis players of all time because of her accomplishment on the women's side of things. And if that makes – I'm not I don't like to categorize it one or the other. I enjoy watching Serena. If she's on TV, I'm watching.
Yeah, I think we also have to put in the fact that McEnroe he's selling a book. And part of selling a book is putting things out there where you can draw attention not only to yourself, but to what you're trying to sell. So I think he's just being smart as far as having a little bit of showmanship in that regard. But when it comes to his comments, I think he understands, and I agree with you, Sean. We can't genderize it. We have to step back and just appreciate what they're able to do. I look at John. He's always been outlandish. He played during the time, and we got to give him credit too now. He played during the time with Agassi and Sampras and those guys. So he's not coming from a place where he's just kind of talking out his head. He played when tennis was great, when people actually paid attention to the sport and really, really digested the men's circuit. Now, tennis, all tennis really has is Serena. And people go to the couch because of Serena. So I think if he was to allude to anything, he should give kudos to, listen, the one thing that keeps our sport alive is a woman who won the Australian Open while she was pregnant. Right. And kind of give more kudos to the fact that she is not only a phenomenal tennis player, but she's a great role model for young women. You don't have she's not one of those people or those athletes who are caught up in the vanity world like the Kardashians are in. Like, she represents gold. She's a standard. That's what you would have liked for John to say. So that's where I kind of sit back, like, you know what, John, I don't disagree with you, but that was a great platform. You kind of highlight everything that Serena represents and what she means to the game. And I thought he missed the ball in that regard. But overall, I didn't take, listen, Diana Taurasi? Yes. If you put her in the NBA, she's number one in the WNBA. If you put her in the NBA, she has to go against LeBron and Golden State. Is she going to be as dominant? No. I mean, so I think that's how I took it. But I can understand why people got upset. But I think we have to kind of slow our roll a little bit and really look at the big picture.
But see, that's to your point. You brought up basketball, and that was my point on this, though. And where I'm not saying I'm trying to defend John McEnroe at all, but Sean, if I say Gino Auriemma, what's the first thing that you think of?
Great coach,
or
Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame women's basketball coach. We don't just call him a coach. We have to clarify. You know what I mean? It's like,
but I will tell you this,
Gino Auriemma, it's like, oh, he's one of the greatest women's coaches of all time, straight up. And if I say John Wooden, you would say greatest men's coach. You know what I mean? So as much as we don't want to, there is the gender that falls on this.
See, here's where I differ, though, because I look at coaches and I look at their leadership abilities. I think Gino could coach anything and be successful.
Correct.
I think Sue Enquist, who was a softball coach at UCLA when I was there and won 10 national championships, she could coach baseball and she'd win a national championship. She could coach basketball based on leadership abilities and inspire people to come together. Pat Summitt could coach anything, and she would have been unbelievable. And so that's where I look at it. John Wooden is the greatest basketball coach in my mind of all time. And I'm biased because I went to UCLA and indoctrinated into the whole Wooden philosophy. Okay? But at the same time, I think that there are people that we can look at outside. And I do separate coaches from the actual athletes themselves and how we view them. And when I look at Serena, I'm in amazement with what she can do. The power of her game, her longevity of her career, her ability to come back, her mental strength as well, handle the criticism that she's been dealt over the course of her career to be one of the finest role models. I have a daughter. She's 10 years old. If my daughter wanted to look up to Serena Williams, she's a soccer player, so she looks up more to soccer players. But if she looked up to Serena Williams, I would be so ecstatic that my daughter was looking at such a positive role model and such a person of power, strength, and grace that doesn't care what the outside world or what everybody else is saying. And she demonstrated that once again, by the way, with her remarks back to John McEnroe, which was just, hey, just leave me out of this for right now. I'm good. I'm just over here trying to have a baby. So I'm good right now. And again, she could have come back and made this a bigger issue. She
didn't. Yeah.
So she's classy, and she's got nothing but grace about her.
Because she holds the torch for her sport. It's just the same thing. You talked about it a little bit off of here, Sean, and I'll bring it back just a little bit here, but Wimbledon is coming up. And when we hear, like, okay, on the women's side, you're like, okay, is Serena playing? Oh, she's not. Oh, okay. All right. That's just how it is. Because you want to know, how is she doing? Where's Serena Williams? Oh, she's not playing. Okay, then we're watching to see who's going to win, but obviously the main attraction is not there.
Thanks for listening to the Locker Room Podcast. Make sure to subscribe by clicking the Listen tab on the ESPN app.